In this review, we break down 10 reasons why Donald Trump wants to destroy Europe, exposing how his push to revive Nord Stream 2 is part of a larger strategy to weaken the EU, divide NATO, and reshape global power in America's favor.
Donald Trump's presidency was marked by unorthodox approaches to international relations, and Europe was no exception. His policies toward the continent signaled a departure from the traditional post-World War II alliance between the United States and Europe. This review explores 10 key reasons behind Trump's desire to reshape Europe, revealing the complex mix of geopolitical, economic, and ideological motivations that influenced his actions. One of Trump's primary objectives was to refocus American foreign policy on defending the US homeland. This meant shifting away from traditional alliances and security guarantees in Europe in favor of prioritizing domestic issues such as border security and revitalizing American manufacturing. Trump viewed European security commitments as burdensome, believing that the US had overinvested in NATO and European defense at the expense of American interests. A recurrent theme throughout Trump's presidency was his demand that European countries, particularly NATO members, increase their defense spending. Trump repeatedly criticized NATO allies for not meeting the alliance's goal of spending at least 2% of GDP on defense, arguing that the US was shouldering an unfair share of the burden. By threatening to reduce America's military presence in Europe, Trump aimed to coerce European nations into investing more in their own defense, thus relieving some of the financial pressure on the US. Trump's administration was deeply concerned about the rise of China as a global superpower. As Europe's economic ties with China strengthened, Trump saw a threat to US interests. He feared that a closer relationship between Europe and China would weaken the West's collective ability to challenge China's growing influence. By pressuring European nations to adopt a more confrontational stance toward Beijing, Trump aimed to isolate China and preserve US dominance in global trade and technology. Trump viewed trade as a key battleground for asserting US dominance, and Europe was a major focus of his economic policies. He repeatedly criticized the European Union for its trade surplus with the US, especially in sectors like automobiles and agriculture. Trump's threats of tariffs and trade wars were part of a broader strategy to renegotiate trade deals on terms more favorable to the US while simultaneously undermining the EU's economic strength. Trump's relationship with the European Union was often antagonistic. He saw the EU as a competitor to US interests, particularly in economic and regulatory matters. By fostering divisions within the EU, particularly by supporting Brexit and aligning with nationalist leaders in Europe, Trump aimed to weaken the bloc's political cohesion. A fragmented EU would be less able to challenge the US on trade, technology, and global governance. Recent discussions and speculations about potential plans to restart the Nord Stream 2 have sparked backlash in Germany. Reviving Nord Stream 2 plays into this strategy by dividing and weakening the European Union. Many EU nations oppose Nord Stream 2, while others such as Germany see it as vital for energy security. By supporting the project, Trump would deepen internal rifts within the EU. Trump could also use Nord Stream 2 as a bargaining chip to force concessions from European leaders on trade and defense policies. Trump's approach to Europe was also shaped by his desire to shift the balance of power in the region, particularly regarding Russia. He was often accused of having a sympathetic stance toward Russian President Vladimir Putin, and his policies at times seemed to align with Moscow's interests. By weakening Europe's security structures and fostering divisions within NATO, Trump may have sought to reduce Europe's ability to counter Russian influence, particularly in Eastern Europe and the post-Soviet states. Reviving Nord Stream 2 weakens Europe's position against Russia by undermining European energy independence. Europe has been actively diversifying its energy sources to reduce reliance on Russia. Restoring Nord Stream 2 would reverse these efforts and give Russia significant influence over European economies. The gas line will be weakening Ukraine's economy and strategic position, Ukraine benefits from gas transit fees when Russian energy passes through its territory. Nord Stream 2 bypasses Ukraine entirely, depriving it of revenue and making it more vulnerable to Russian aggression. Trump's America First philosophy prioritized reducing US financial commitments abroad, including those related to European security. He viewed military bases and defense aid to European countries as a waste of American taxpayer money. By scaling back these commitments, Trump believed the US could reallocate resources to domestic priorities, such as infrastructure development and tax cuts for American businesses. Reviving Nord Stream 2 aligns with this goal because a Europe dependent on Russian gas would have less incentive to build military defenses against Russia, which could justify the US reducing its NATO obligations and cutting defense spending in Europe. Trump could leverage European energy dependence on Russia to demand economic and security concessions, reducing the direct burden on US taxpayers. Trump's foreign policy was characterized by a desire to reassert US dominance in global affairs. He believed that traditional multilateral institutions such as NATO and the United Nations had constrained US power. In Trump's view, weakening these alliances and partnerships in Europe would give the US more freedom to pursue its interests unilaterally. By reshaping Europe's security and political landscape, Trump sought to ensure that the US remained the dominant global power. Reviving Nord Stream 2 contributes to this strategy by isolating NATO's European members. If Germany and other major European nations rely on Russian gas, they will be less committed to NATO's collective defense efforts, weakening the alliance and making Europe more dependent on US-led security arrangements. The US under Trump became one of the world's leading producers of oil and natural gas, and Trump sought to use this energy dominance as a geopolitical tool. Europe's dependence on Russian energy, particularly natural gas, provided an opportunity for Trump to promote American liquefied natural gas as an alternative. However, his reversal on Nord Stream 2 suggests a strategic pivot. Rather than trying to sell US LNG to Europe, Trump may see Nord Stream 2 as a way to gain leverage over Europe by controlling the pipeline's political fate. By reviving the project, he could pressure Europe into making trade and security concessions in exchange for continued US support. Ultimately, Trump's actions toward Europe have been driven by a desire to reshape international alliances in a way that better served US interests. He views traditional alliances such as NATO and the EU as outdated structures that no longer aligned with America's priorities. By pressuring European countries to adopt more pro-American policies on defense, trade, and foreign relations, Trump wants to create a new world order where the US would be unchallenged in its global leadership role. Reviving Nord Stream 2 aligns with this goal by shifting Europe's alliances. A Europe that relies on Russian energy would be less aligned with US policies and more vulnerable to Russian and US political influence, forcing European nations to negotiate with both superpowers rather than acting independently. The gas line will be reinforcing Trump's transactional approach to foreign policy. Unlike Biden's strategy of isolating Russia, Trump may see Nord Stream 2 as a tool for cutting deals with both Russia and Germany in exchange for favorable trade and military arrangements. In conclusion, Donald Trump's potential revival of Nord Stream 2 is not just about energy. It is a geopolitical weapon aimed at weakening Europe, isolating NATO allies, and forcing European nations into a more dependent relationship with the US. This move fits perfectly within his broader strategy of reshaping Europe into a weaker, more fragmented, and more US-dependent bloc. While his actions may be controversial, they align with his long-term vision of maximizing US power through economic, military, and geopolitical dominance.